Hi everyone, I hope you're all doing well in these difficult times. Like many other people, I have a lot of spare time right now because nobody's supposed to go outside unless they really have to. But the good news is that I have a little more time to record tutorials. Today we're going to build another shed. We did one a couple of weeks ago that was more complicated than the one we will be doing today. Like the previous shed, we're going to build this one based on a PDF plan. I will be using a plugin for creating the roof, which is called Stairs Profile. And Stairs Profile is part of the architectural pack by Kaleidos 4D. You can also buy it as a separate plugin if you want to. You don't need to buy the plugin though, because you can download a project file with the spline that we will be using to create that roof. So make sure to check the video description for the download link to that file. We will also need a PDF plan, and you can find it on this website here, Construct 101. I've posted a link to that site in the description, and you can either get this plan by ordering it. It doesn't cost anything, you just need to click on the donate button, enter your address details and an email, and once you've done that you can check out and download the plan for free. If you don't want to do that, you can scroll down a bit and there's a link here that lets you see the online version of this plan. And if you click here, you'll jump to the site with the instructions, and you can click on each of these images to make it bigger. Personally, I found the PDF plan a little more comfortable to work with, so I downloaded the PDF plan. Once you've downloaded the project file and the PDF plan, we can get started. First of all, we're going to have a quick look at the PDF plan. And one thing I would like to mention right away is that this plan doesn't seem to be 100% accurate. If you take a look at this first image here, you can see that the top of the shed seems to be flush with the floor. On the drawings on the next page, you can see that this top actually seems to be a little bit smaller than the floor. And then later and further down the plan, you will find that actually this seems to be what we need to do. Since we're not going to build this shed in our backyard, but in 3D, we're not going to worry about the inaccuracies. What we'll do instead is we'll try to keep things simple, fast and efficient. Because I've already done a tutorial on building a similar shed that was more complicated, and that was a tutorial that I uploaded about a month ago, we're going to move along fairly quickly. So you need to have a decent knowledge of Cinema 4D to be able to follow along. If you find it difficult to follow this tutorial, please refer to the other tutorial, which is much slower and goes into more detail. I will be using a lot of shortcuts in Cinema 4D this time, and I'll try to explain everything, but like I said, we're going to move along fairly quickly. Now let's have a quick look at this plan. What I'm going to start with is not the first image here on page 4, which is the floor, but we're actually going to start with this image here on page 5, because this one shows the bottom objects that we need, which are the skids. And on top of that we have what is called the bands, and the bands are 2 by 6 inches and 8 feet long. And in between the bands we have these floor joists, which are also 2 by 6 inches. And on top of this we have the floor deck, which consists of floorboards that are 2 by 6 inches. And there's another thing that is a bit weird about this plan, because if we have 8 of these floorboards, as you see in the image here, we will cover the exact width of 4 feet. So 6 times 8 is 48 inches, and 4 feet is exactly 48 inches. According to the plan, there's going to be a small gap in between these floorboards. So what I'll do is I'll just make these a little less deep. I will start building this shed the same way I did the previous one. So I'm going to add a plane to the scene, which will be our reference for the first few steps. And I will make this 8 feet by 4 feet. And then we need the skids. I'm going to use a cube to create those. And the skids are 8 feet and they are 4 by 4 inches. I'll make this editable, move the object axis like so, and I'll put it on the floor, switch on snapping, go to my top view, hit NH to switch to wireframe, and I'm going to snap this skid to here. And I'm going to put this into a symmetry object, change the position of the axis to 0, switch off the axis, and change the mirror plane of the symmetry object to XY. So this is the skid, and I'm going to make a copy, and this will be our band. I'm going to move this up and snap it to the top of the skid, and this one is 6 inches high and 2 inches deep. Let's put this in a symmetry object, and I'm going to move the axis of the symmetry object to the center and change the mirror plane like before. Let me undo that. So that's looking better. I'm going to rename the symmetry object, and I'll make a copy of the band, and this is going to be our floor joist. I'm going to rotate this around 90 degrees, reset the axis, zero the object out on the z-axis, and then I'm going to move it back to here. And we need to change the length to 44 inches in order for this to fit in between the bands. We need 7 of those floor joists, so let's add a cloner, and I have changed the default settings of my cloner because I wanted it to always have the same default gray color as the other objects. So what I did was, and I've shown that several times in other tutorials, I've switched the shading to constant shading with lines, and if you go to the cloner and the transform tab, you can now use the color picker to select the color. You can click on one of these objects here, and I've also changed the default position. It's usually 10 on the y-axis, and I've changed that to 0. And after I made those changes, I went to edit and set this as the default. So all of my cloners come in with the default gray color and with the position zeroed out. We'll start with 2 clones. I'll move this second clone over to here, and then switch that cloner to endpoint and change the count to 7. So these are our floor joists. Let's make another copy of the band, and I think we can delete our reference plane now. And this is going to be our floor board. I'll just move it up and snap it to the top of the band. And for this we need a width of 6 inches and a height of 2. And because we need a small gap in between the floorboards, I'm going to change the width to 5.8. And let's put this in a cloner. Again, I'll start with 2 clones. And let's zoom in a little bit and move this over a little bit further. And then hold down the Alt key and change the distance in smaller increments. So we need 42.2 here. And now we can switch the cloner to endpoint and change the count to 8. So this is our floor deck. Let's go ahead and put the skids in a null object. And I'm using the skids here because if I switch to my front view, you can see the null object is right here at the center, at the bottom of the entire floor. I'm going to put this null object in another null object and call this one floor assembly. And this is going to be our firewood shed. And we can now drag all of these objects in there. And also I'm going to look for all of the polygon objects and I'll change the thong angle of all of these to 22. And with the shed selected, I'm going to hold down Shift and add a bevel deformer. And I'll change that to, or change the offset to 0.1, which should be enough. And if you want to, you can also use angle. It's probably not necessary because we're only going to use square or rectangular wood parts. If I hit Ctrl B, I can go to my render settings, and I'm going to add ambient occlusion here. Shift W to close that window. And now we have some contact shadows here. Let's go ahead and switch off that bevel deformer, and let's continue with the front wall. Let's have another look at the PDF plan first. If we scroll down a bit, we can see the front wall here on page 6, and you can see the different components. We have some wall studs, then we have a king stud, the jack stud, and at the top we have what is called cripple studs. We have a header, and we have a bottom plate and a top plate. And down here you can see the dimensions. All of these objects are 2 by 4 inches. And in this image, the bottom plate is still 8 feet. We need to remove the part at the center because it's going to end here where the jack stud is. The header also consists of 2 by 4 wood pieces, but if you take a look at the plan, we need actually 2 of those. So we need 2 by 4 inch header pieces that are 6 feet long, but we also need a plywood sheet in between those. And that plywood sheet is 1/2 inch, which means we actually can't use a depth of 2 inches for the headers. It's up to you whether or not you want to put that plywood piece in between the 2 header pieces. So let's go ahead and start with the bottom plate. And for the bottom plate, we can reuse the floorboard. I'll make these 4 inches deep. And for the floorboard, I'm going to move the axis over all the way to this corner here. So this is our bottom plate. And I'm going to make a copy, and this is going to be our top plate. And I'm going to make another copy, and this is going to be our wall stud. And the wall stud is 2 inches on the x-axis and 4 inches on the z. Let's go ahead and move this up and snap it to here. And if you take a look at the PDF plan, the wall stud is 7 feet 5.25 inches. So let's change that height to 7 feet, and then I'm going to add plus 5.25 inches. And we also need an 18-degree angle cut on top of all of these pieces here. So let's go to the right view, switch to point mode, grab the line cut tool, switch off visible only, and I'm going to use an angle constraint and set this to 18 degrees. And now we can make our cut, snap to this point. We can select these points here, snap them to these points, deselect everything, and optimize this object. And then we can create an instance of this wall stud. And I'm going to move this over and snap it to here, because as you can see in the PDF plan, we have 2 right next to each other. And the next one is identical to the wall stud, it's just called king stud. And you can see in the PDF plan that we have a distance of 1 foot and 1.5 inches between the edge of the wall stud here on the corner and the jack stud. The way I'll do this is, first of all, I'm going to make a copy of the wall stud, and we need the polygon version because this is a little bit shorter than the other studs here. And I'm going to move this over on the x-axis plus 13.5 inches. And actually we need to move this back 2 inches. So -2. And if I grab a spline and create a point here and a point here and then select all of the points, you can see that the distance is 13.5 inches, which is 1 foot, that is 12 inches plus 1.5 inches. Next I'm going to make another copy of this wall stud instance here. And this is our king stud. And I'll move it over, snap it to here, and I'm going to move it back 2 inches. So this one is our jack stud. I'll go to point mode and I'll just make a straight cut here. And I'm going to select these points here. If you take a look at the PDF plan, you can see that the jack stud is 6 feet and 6 inches. So I'm going to switch to my move tool, go to the modeling axis tab here, move the y-axis down, and I'm going to enter 6 feet, and I'm just going to add 6 inches. So it's 78 inches. And now we can select the polygons at the top and split these off. And this will be the cripple stud. Let's select the jack stud, delete the polygons and optimize the object. And I'm going to use the HB solo script from the HB modeling bundle, and I have that mapped to a shortcut to solo the jack stud, and then we can use close polygon hole to close that hole up here. And I'll select the cripple stud and solo that, and I'm also going to close that polygon hole at the bottom. And let's go ahead and hide this for a second. And next I'm going to put the header on top of the jack stud. And for the header we could use the bottom plate. So I'll make a copy of that and call that header piece 1. And I'll move the object axis of this one to the center. And then I'll just move that up and use axis extension to put it on top of the jack stud. And the header has a height of 4 inches and a width of 6 feet. And you can see it's a little bit short, and there's one of two things we can do. We can either make this a little bit longer, and because we're working in 3D that's not going to be a problem, or we can just move the other studs over a little bit. So you can do whatever you want here. I'll just make this 73 inches so that it's flush with the king stud, and that's what the image shows here in the PDF plan. We also need to change the depth to 2 inches here, and I'm going to make a copy and snap it to here, and this is going to be my plywood header plywood piece, and this is 0.5 inches. So like I said before, if we put that plywood piece in between the two header pieces, we can't really make that header 2 inches deep, which means I'm going to reduce this to 1.75 inches. Take that plywood piece and I'm going to move it back and snap it to that header, and then I'm going to make an instance of header piece 1, and this is header piece 2. And I'm going to snap that over to here. Need to move this a little bit further to here. Okay, so that's looking good. Let's put the top plate on top of these objects. I'm just going to select it and snap it to the top here. And I'm going to rotate this minus 18 degrees. And now I'm going to make our cripple stud visible again, and I'll move the axis over to here, go to point mode, and I'll just move these points up and snap them to the top of the header. And let's go ahead and use axis center again to move the axis to here. I'm going to use symmetry for part of the objects, but as for the cripple studs, we need some of these to be here at the center, and I'm going to create instances of the one that we already have. So what I'll do is I'll create an instance of this cripple stud, and I'm going to move this to the center of the grid, and we need to move this to -1. So that it sits right at the center here. And we don't have any measurements regarding the distance between these two cripple studs here. So I'm just going to eyeball that. Let's make a copy and move this over to here. Let's do a quick render. Maybe I'll move this back a little bit. Let's do maybe -17. And that looks like it's about the distance that we see here in the reference image. And we need another copy here. Put this to +17, and I'm going to take this cripple stud and put it in a symmetry object. I'll change the position of the axis to the center, and there we go, that's our cripple studs. And there's one more piece that we need to create, which is the brace, and that is this part here. And the brace is 1 foot 6 inches, so that means it's 18 inches, and we need 45-degree cuts on either side of the brace. So I'm going to make another copy of the bottom plate. This is going to be our brace, and I'll just rename the symmetry object here to cripple studs. And I'm also going to group these. And rename this null object to cripple studs. So this is the brace. I'm going to center the axis on this one. And I'll make this 18 inches. And this piece has a height of 2 inches and a depth of 4 inches, I think. Let's just check the plan. Yeah, 2 by 4 and 18 inches long. And what I'll do with this is I'll rotate it 45 degrees. And I'm going to reset the axis to 0. And then I'm just going to make 2 cuts like this. Select these points and snap them to here. And I'm going to snap these points to here. Optimize the object. Go to model mode, and I'm going to move the axis down to this point, and then use axis extension to move it up to here. And then we can just drag the object and snap it to this corner, and it will fit right in between the jack stud and the header. So that's all the pieces that we need for the front wall framing. Now I'm going to group some of these objects and mirror them over. So we need the, actually before I do, I'm going to change that bottom plate. Let's go to point mode and select the points over here, and I'll just move these over and use axis extension to line them up with this edge of the jack stud here. And we need to select all of these pieces and move them up 2 inches. Okay, so that's looking a little better. So let's go ahead and select the bottom plate, the wall stud instance, the king stud, the jack stud, and the brace. I'll put these in a null object and call these, well, let's call these front wall components, and I'll put the object axis to 0, and I'll also move it down and snap it to the top of the floorboard, and then we can put this in a symmetry object and rename that to front wall components. Then we can take all of these objects, or we could group the header pieces as well. And then let's group all of these. And again, I'm going to move the axis over to 0 and just move it down, and let's do that in the front view, and I'll snap it to here. And this is our front wall framing. I'll just delete that spline here, and let's go ahead and put this null object in here. So now we can move on to the back wall, and you can find that back wall on page 7 of the PDF plan. And this is going to be fairly simple. We have a bottom plate, a top plate, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 wall studs. All of these are 2x4 wood pieces, and we need to change the wall studs to a certain height. Let's go ahead and copy the wall stud and the top plate, and I'll just move these back. I'm going to change the rotation of the top plate to 0, make a copy, call this bottom plate, and I'm also going to move the object axis. Let's do this in the top view. I'll just move it over to here. And then I'm going to snap it to the top of that floorboard here. I just want to make sure that I snapped it to the right position. So let's grab that wall stud, and I'm also going to move the object axis for this one to here. I'll just check this in the right view, because sometimes it's a little tricky to snap it to the right position in the perspective view. Okay, so let's snap this to here. Let's go to point mode. Just select the points at the top and scale them down to 0. And let's go ahead and select that top plate. Just move the axis to this point here. And then I'm going to snap it to the top of that wall stud. Now we need to change the height of that wall stud. Let's have another look at the plan. So this is 6 feet and change. So let's first of all change this to 6 feet. And we need to add 2 inches. And then we need 7/8 inches. And I'll just move that top plate to the top of the wall stud again. And let's check this again. We need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of these wall studs. I'm going to put this in a cloner. And let's just move this over to here. Change the cloner to endpoint and use 7 copies. And then we need another copy of that wall stud. Actually, I'm going to create an instance. And I'm going to snap it to here. And then we can either use a symmetry object or just create another instance for this side over here. And we can actually snap it to here. So let's rename this cloner to wall studs. I'm going to group all the wall studs and then group all of these objects. Let's just check the object axis. I'll just move this to the center. Okay, and I'll put this in a null object first and then add the top and bottom plates to this null object, and this is our back wall framing. And for the side wall, we only need a few pieces. The wall studs are the same heights as the ones for the back wall, so we can just use copies. And I'm not going to worry about the specific distances here. We don't need to put them at the same position. There's no obvious reason to do that. So we're just going to use the cloner and create instances of these wall studs here. So let's go ahead and copy that wall stud, and I'm also going to copy the bottom plate here. And let's go ahead and rotate this around 90 degrees. And I'm going to snap it to here. And then we can select these points here and snap them to here. And let's go ahead and take that wall stud. I'll just move this over a bit. Rotate it 90 degrees. And I'll just snap that to here. I'm also going to reset the axis, and I'll do the same for the bottom plate. And let's go ahead and put that wall stud in a cloner. And I'll move this over to here. Switch that cloner to endpoint, and we need 4 copies here. One, two, three, 4. And we also need a top plate. I just use more accurate names for my objects here. So actually we can create an instance. So this is the sidewall top plate, and I'll just move this up and snap it to here. Let's go ahead and group these. And I'll move the axis to 0. And snap it to here. Actually, I'm going to move the axis over to 0 on the x-axis. And then we can put this in a symmetry object. To mirror this over to the other side, and that's our sidewall framing. And I'll put this in our firewood shed, null object, and I think I'll just rename all of these objects. Back wall. Okay, so the walls are pretty much finished, and we can now move on and create the rafters. You can find the details for the rafters on page 9 of the PDF plan. We don't need to worry about any of the dimensions or angles that we need to cut, because the only thing we need to know is that these rafters have to be flush with the front and the back end of the shed. The rafters are 2 by 4 inches. I'm going to copy the bottom plate of the sidewall here. If I hold down Shift and right click, I get a selection of the objects underneath my cursor, and I'm going to select the sidewall bottom plate. And now I can copy and paste this plate. For some reason the instance gets copied as well. I'm just going to delete that and rename this to rafter. And I'm going to pull this up. The rafter needs to be 2 inches in the x-axis and 4 inches in the y-axis. And let's go ahead and put it on top of the shed. For now, I'll just move it down and snap it to this point here. And then I'm going to rotate it -18 degrees. Let's go to polygon mode. I'm going to select this polygon here and just move it forward a little bit. And then we can make a cut, snapping the knife to the front of the shed. And we can move these points and snap them into position, optimize the object. And here at the back, I'm just going to move these points to here. And I'm going to make another cut. Again, snap the points into position here. And we're going to need another cut along this line here. And then we can just grab these points, snap them to here, and optimize the object again. So now we have something that is flush with the front and the back of the shed. We need 7 copies of this rafter. So let's put this into a cloner and move that copy over to 94, I think. And then we can switch the cloner to endpoint and change the count to 7. So these are our rafters. Let's go ahead and put them in the shed null object. And next we're going to do the siding. And you can find the siding in the PDF plan on page 10. We have 16 boards on the front and on the back, and we have 8 wooden boards on the side walls. And I googled for this type of siding on the internet and found that there are 3 different sizes. What we're going to do for the depth is 0.75 inches. For the sidings, I'm going to create a cube, and I'm going to move this up a little bit and make it editable, and then go to point mode. And I'm going to select the points here on the side. Let me just reset my axis here. And I'm going to snap these to the border of the shed on both sides. And we need to move the bottom points down to here. They need to sit on top of the floorboards. And let's go to the top view and snap these points to the back of the shed, and the ones here to the front of the shed. And now we can delete the polygons at the top and at the bottom. And we can also get rid of one polygon on one of the sides of the cube. So this is what we have left. I'm going to select the polygon at the back and split it off, and this is going to be my back wall siding. Let's select the original object, delete this polygon, and I'm going to split this polygon off, and this is going to be the side wall siding. Again, delete the polygon from the original object, optimize this, and this is going to be our front wall siding. I'm going to hide these 2 objects here for now and start with the front wall. I'll hide this as well. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a spline. I've set the type to linear here, and I'm just going to draw an outline of the opening here at the front of the shed. So I'm going to snap to these points. And let's left click on the first point to close that spline. Switch to the move tool. And I'm going to select both of these and solo them. And on that spline, I'm going to move these bottom points down a little bit further. I'm going to ring select the edges on this polygon here. And like I said before, we need 16 boards. I'm going to use edge cut. And because we need 16 boards, we need 15 subdivisions. I'm going to put the axis of this object to the bottom and then put it in a null object, which is going to be the front wall siding. And then I'm going to select this object here, go to polygon mode. And in order to keep everything consistent with the rest of the model, I'm going to do separate boards. You could use instances for some of these, but it doesn't make much sense to do that, so I'm just going to create single wooden boards here. And I'll do that by selecting each of the boards and splitting the boards off. If you want to keep this as a single object, you could select all of the polygons and then go to Mesh, Commands, and disconnect. And if you click on the little icon here, you could uncheck Preserve Groups to get individual polygons, and then you could extrude these polygons and apply a bevel deformer and also get the look of individual boards, but you could keep these as a single object. But like I said, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to select each of these and I'm going to split the polygons off one by one. And you can see we have 16 individual pieces. We can now delete the original object. I'm going to select these, and I'm going to use a free plugin called Batch Rename Objects to rename these. I'm going to start at number 1, set this to 2 digits, and this is going to be my front wall siding. Hit OK, and it takes a second to update, and now I have renamed all of these. In order to create the opening, I'm going to use that spline. Let's go to the front view. I'm going to grab my knife tool. If I hold down Control and left click on the spline, I will create a cut. If I make this invisible, you can see we have now created these new edges here. And now we can select these polygons and delete them and optimize the object. Let's go to model mode. I'm going to select this polygon, this one, and this one, and I'm going to solo these. Go back to the front view, and I'm going to remove the n-gons by making a couple of cuts here. Let's unsolo that. And it looks like the boards are a little bit short. I'm going to select all of these. Select the top edges, and I'll just snap them to the top of the rafters here. Now we can go to polygon mode. Hit D for extrude. Let's create caps, and I'm going to extrude these forward 0.75 inches. And there we go. That is our front wall siding. Let's go ahead and put this in the null object, and let's continue with the sidewall siding. I'll just move these points up a little bit and then do a ring selection here. And on the side we need 8 boards, so I'm going to use edge cut with 7 subdivisions, and then I'll make a cut from here to here and delete the points at the top. Looks like I screwed this up, so I'm just going to undo and make that cut again. Okay, that's still not working. just go back again. And let's go ahead and try this again. I'm still not getting this line here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a guide. And I'm going to switch on guide snap. Select my sidewall siding again. And snap the knife tool to the guide. Let's switch that off. So now we have all the edges that we need. Let's go ahead and delete the points at the top. Again, I'm going to put the axis at the bottom of this object. Let's go ahead and solo this, and I'll put it in a null object. Rename this to sidewall siding. And again, I'm going to split off each of these polygons here. So we have 8 objects. Let's delete the original. I'm going to rename these objects like before. And extrude them 0.75 inches. Let's unsolo this. And I'm going to select the null object, put the object axis to 0 on the x-axis, and then I'm going to put this in a symmetry object. Rename that to sidewall siding and put it in our null object here. And let's delete that spline. We may need that guide, so I'm going to keep that. And now let's deal with the back wall siding. First of all, I'm going to move these points at the back down. Maybe let's do this in the side view. I'm going to snap them to here. On the back wall, all of the boards are identical, so in this case I'm going to use a cloner. But first of all, I'm going to use edge cut with 15 subdivisions. And then we can select all of these edges, delete them, put the axis at the bottom of this object, put it in a null object, or maybe not. In this case it's not really necessary. We're going to use a cloner. So let's go to polygon mode and extrude this polygon 0.75. And I'm going to put this in a cloner. And let's see, this is 6 inches, so we can use 6 inches on the x-axis and 16 copies. Going to drag this into the shed null object. Let's switch on that bevel deformer and see how everything looks. And everything seems fine. So now we can continue and add the trims and the roof. I'm going to continue with the roof deck, and you can find this on page 11 of the PDF plan. For the roof deck we need plywood that is 1/2 inch thick. For the trims we need wood pieces that are 1 by 4 inches. And you can see we have trims around the opening, on the corners, and here at the top. And we also have a drip edge that goes around the top edge of the shed. In order to create the roof deck, I'm going to copy the rafter. We can't really select it here, so I'm just going to drag out a copy here. Rename this to roof deck. And what I'll do here is I'll select the top polygon, hit UI to invert the selection, delete all the other polygons, and then optimize the object. And then we can select this edge, go to the front view, and I'm going to snap this to here. The roof deck is flush with the siding. And now we can ring select these edges and connect them. And I'll just delete these 2 points. Let's move the axis over to the center. And I'm going to extrude this up 0.5 inches. And let's put this in a symmetry object. And this is our roof deck. Next, we're going to do the trims on the top edges. And in order to get those, I'm going to copy the top plate of the front wall. And I'm going to reset the axis of this and rotate it back to 0. And this needs to be 1 inch deep. Let's go ahead and move this forward and snap it to the siding here. Just move the object axis back and snap it to here, and then snap the object to here. The height is 4 inches, and for now I'm going to move this up and snap it to the top of the siding. We need to move this up a little bit further actually. Let's do this right away. First of all, what I'm going to do is I'll make a cut, and I still have my angle constraint on here and I've set it to 18 degrees. So I'm going to make a cut like this. Move these points down and optimize the object. And let's see, let's make our guide visible. And I'll just move this up and snap it to here. And then I'm going to take our trim. I'll move the object axis down to this point and then snap it to the guide. So now this surface here is flush with the roof deck. And for the back wall we need to do something similar. So I'm going to select the top plate of the back wall, copy and paste it, and let's go ahead and move that back. First of all, I'm going to move the object axis to the top corner, and then let's move it and snap it to the siding. And I'm also going to move it up and snap it to the guide. And let's go ahead and make this 4 inches for the height and 1 inch for the depth. And I'll just move these points down and snap them to the guide. We also need to make both of these a little bit longer, because we have the siding and then we also have the trims here on the side, which also are going to be 1 inch deep. Let's go ahead and rename these objects. I'm going to call this top trim for the front wall, and this is the back wall top trim. And let's go ahead and center the axis on this one, and I'll add plus 1.75 and I'll add another 1.75 inches, and I'll do the same for this one. We can now copy the length of this piece here, and I'm going to center the axis on this one and then paste that number in here. Next we'll need the trim on the side here, and I think what I'll do here is I'll just copy the roof. So let's go ahead and drag out a copy of this, and I'm going to move it over and snap it to here. And I'll make this 1 inch. And I'll make it 4 inches in the y-axis. Let's just check the object axis here. I'll move the axis to the top and then just scale it to 4 inches. And I'm going to select these points and move the object axis to this point, and I'll just move these and snap them down to here. And here at the top I'm going to move the object axis to this point and then move these up and snap them to here. And I'll make a cut straight down. Move these points over, and over here I'll just move this point down and snap it to here. And it looks like this is still a bit too high. I want to make this flush with the top trim. So I'm going to move these points up and snap them to here. And I'll do the same thing here at the back. And I think I also need to optimize the object. So that's looking good. And this is the sidewall top trim. And we can put this in a symmetry object. And rename this to sidewall top trim. And now we can deal with the trims on the corners here. And I'll start with the one on the front wall. So let's see if I can select this, copy and paste it. And this is the front wall left trim. And I'll move the object axis over to here. And I'll make this 4 inches and 1 inch. And then all we need to do is move these top points down and snap them to here. And we also need to move this forward and snap it on top of the siding here. And we also need to move this back minus 1.75. And we can make a copy of this. And let's rename this to back wall left trim. And for this I'm going to move the axis over to here, and then in the side view I'll just snap it to here. And let's let's go ahead and move these points at the top down and snap them to here. Oh, we need to move these down a little bit further to this edge here. And let's make a copy of this. And I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees, reset the axis. And I'm going to move this back -4 on the z-axis. That was a bit too much. +1. And it looks like we need to move this back +1. And we also need to move this back +1. So that also means that we need to move this one over +1. Oh, no. Let's keep it there. We do need to move it over, so I've just moved it over 1 inch. And this one here, we need to move this back a bit. Oh, I did this wrong. So let's move this back -1 and another -0.75 plus 0.75. Actually, I want this to overlap this piece here, so I'm just going to move it back again. -1.75, and I will move this back over again, -1. So it looks like I did it right the first time. Okay, plus 0.75. Now we've got it where we want it, or where we need this piece to be. Let's go to point mode. I'll just select these points here at the top, and I'm going to snap them to here. And this is the sidewall back trim. Let's make a copy of this, and I'll move this over. And I'm going to snap it to here. And let's move this back -0.75. Like so. We need to move this back a little bit further and snap it to here. -1 would have been the distance. This is the sidewall front trim. I'll just move these points up, snap them to this edge here, and I think we need to go all the way up to here. Okay, and that looks a little bit better. And next I'm going to make a copy of the front wall left trim. And I'll move this over to the opening, snap it to here, and then just move it back 4 inches. So this is the front wall trim opening left. Let's make a copy, and this is the opening top. I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees, and then I'll just move it up. Let me just do this in the front view. First of all, I'm going to reset the axis here, and I'm also going to center it on the object, and then we can move this up and snap it to, let's see, it's a bit confusing. I think we need to snap it to this edge here. Okay, so that looks good. And now we can select this one and move these points down, snap them to here. Let me just check if this is in the right position, because it doesn't look like it. I'll just select this and I'll move the axis over to here. Actually, we need to move it to here, and then move this back a bit and snap it to here, and now we should have something that is flush with the opening. Okay, so that is a little bit better. And I'll just move the axis of this one over to here, just so it's easier to snap it to here. And I'll make a copy of the front wall opening left and just move it over to positive 34.5. And we need to move this back 4 more inches to make it flush with this opening. And now we can select the opening top, and I'll just move these points back. And snap them to here. And I'm going to delete this copy again. We're going to mirror part of these objects over using symmetry. And the only thing that's still missing for the trim is that part here. And I'm going to reuse the brace from the front wall frame. So I'm going to select it, copy and paste it. And for some reason it pasted all of these objects here. Let's just find that brace, drag it out, and delete the rest again. So what I'll do with this one is I'll just move it over to here. Let's go to the top view, and I'll just move the object axis back to here, and then snap it to here, I think. And let's give this a depth of 1 inch. And this brace was 2 by 4, and we need to change that. What used to be 2 should be 4 now. And the easiest way to do that is just by selecting these points and moving them up 2 inches. And I'll just move these points over -2 inches. So a quick look. Okay, and that seems to be fine. Now what we can do is select some of these objects, put them in a null object and mirror them over. And what we need is the front brace, the opening on the left side here. We need the front wall trim, side wall back, and this one. And I'll put these in a null object. And I'm going to move the axis over to the center. And then just use the symmetry object to mirror these over. Call this trims. Call this one trims, and I'm going to group all of these and use axis center to put the axis at the bottom actually, but it's not working, so I'm just going to move this down manually and snap it to here. So these are our trims. Let's go ahead and put those into the shed null object. And let's do a quick test just to see how everything looks. And that seems to be fine. There seems to be a little bit of shading, so I'm just going to look for all of the polygon objects and make sure that the Phong angle of all of these is 22, and that fixes that problem. So that's looking a lot better. Let's go ahead and switch off that bevel deformer. And next we're going to do the trim around the edges at the top here. And for the trims, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make another copy of the roof deck. And I'm going to select the top polygon. It's already selected. Hit UI, or UI rather. Delete the other polygons and optimize this object. And then I'm going to select the edges at the top, the bottom, and here on the side, and I'm going to extrude these. And let's do an offset of maybe 3 inches. And I'm going to extrude these again. And this time I'm going to use an angle of, I think it has to be minus 90 degrees. And let's do maybe 2 inches. And then I'm going to extrude again, maybe 0.5. Let me just do that again, something went wrong. So I'm going to extrude these with an angle of minus 90, and I'll do 2 inches. And then I'm going to extrude again. And let's use 0.5. And I'm going to use an angle of maybe 30 degrees. Okay, so that's looking good. Let's go to polygon mode. I'm going to get rid of this polygon here. And then I'm going to select all the polygons and extrude these with caps and using an offset of 0.25. And I want the roof deck to be flush with that drip edge. So I'm going to select the roof deck, and I'll just move this polygon up in the y-axis plus 0.25. And what I'll do with these ones, in order to make things slightly more realistic, because it's unlikely that this is one piece in reality, I'm going to select these polygons and split them off. So this is the drip edge front. And I'm going to split off these polygons. And this is the drip edge side. And let's select the ones at the back and split those off. I'll just delete this one, and this is the drip edge back. I'm going to solo this, delete the polygons on the mirror plane over there, and use close polygon hole to close this hole here. And then I'm just going to select all the polygons and remove the n-gons. And I'm going to solo the drip edge on the side, and I'm going to use close polygon hole again to close off both ends here, and then again select all the polygons and remove the n-gons. And I'm going to solo this one, and again use close polygon hole, delete the polygons over there on the mirror plane, select all of the polygons and remove the n-gons. And let's unsolo everything. I'm going to put these in a null object, call this drip edge, and because these objects are so small, we're going to use a second bevel deformer. I'm going to make a copy of this one, and if I switch that on, you can see the offset is probably a little bit too high. I'm going to bring that down to 0.03 maybe. Let's try 0.04. Something like this. And I'm going to put the firewood shed in another null object. Put my drip edge in there, and I'm going to rename the top null object to firewood shed and call this firewood shed components. And as for the drip edge, I'm going to use symmetry on all of these. So let's go ahead and put this in a symmetry object and this one. And we can make both of these editable. So that's the back and the front. And for both of these, I'm going to remove the edges at the center. And for this one, we'll also use a symmetry object to mirror this over and just call this drip edge side. Okay, so that is looking pretty good. The only thing that's left to do is the roof. As far as the top of the roof is concerned, there's no real description in the PDF plan on how to do that, which means we're going to improvise a little bit. As far as the detail for the roof is concerned, I'm going to keep everything pretty low poly. I'm going to start the roof by creating a new file, and in order to create my roof, I'm going to use a plugin that is part of the Kaleidos Architectural Pack 2.6, and that plugin is called Stairs Profile. Don't worry if you don't have that plugin. I will provide you with a copy of the spline once I've made this stair profile object editable. I like to use this a lot for roof tiles and for vinyl sidings, stuff like that. And what I'm going to do with this is, first of all, I'm going to change the number of steps to 8, and I'll change the treads to, let's do 6 inches for now. And I'm going to change the height or the riser to 0.4. And this will give us an object like this. I'm going to move this up a little bit And then I'm going to create a guide and drag it out like this, switch to the move tool and make sure that it's 0 on the y-axis. And I'm going to make the stairs profile object editable. And this is the file you can download. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to switch on snapping, and I'm going to move the object axis to one of these steps here. And we also need guide snap, so I'm going to switch that on, switch off enable axis, and then I'm going to move this down and snap to the guide. And then I'm going to use axis extension to rotate this, and I'll snap to this point here and snap that to the guide. And now what we have is a flat surface for the most part at the bottom and a roof-like structure on the top. And I'm doing it like this so I'm not getting any gaps in between the roof tiles later. Let's go ahead and reset the axis. So I'm going to put that back to 0. And next what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in an extrude object, and I'll make the extrusion 8 feet for now. And you can keep this as a single object if you want to, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this extrude object editable, and we're going to reduce the geometry to just one of these tiles here. And in order to do that, I'm going to select the extrude object, and on the caps tab I'm going to switch on create single object, and then I'll make this editable. Let's go ahead and delete these tags. And let's go to point mode. And here at the end of the object, I'm going to make a cut, switch off visible only, and I'll make a cut from this point straight down. And now we can select all of these points here and delete them. And we can also get rid of this point here. And at the other end, I'm also going to make a cut like this. And I'm going to select these points, snap them to here, and optimize the object. And now we can use close polygon hole to create a polygon here. And let's go back to model mode and use axis center, and I'm going to move the axis all the way over on the x-axis and all the way down on the y-axis. So we should have something like this. And let's call this roof board. And I'm going to copy it and paste it to my shed file. Let's move this over a bit. We need to rotate this way, 90 degrees. And let's put the axis back to 0. And I'm going to put this object at the center of the scene and then just move it up. Let's do this in the side view. And we also need to switch off the bevel deformers here. So I'm going to take the object and snap it to the top here. And we can rotate this minus 18 degrees to make it sit right on this slanted surface here. And this needs to be a little bit longer. So let's try maybe 100 inches. And that's still a little bit short. Let's try 105. And I think that looks good. I'm going to put this in a cloner. And let's see, this is 5.96 inches. Let's change that to an even number for now. And let's do 6. And that means we can clone along the z-axis using an offset of 6 inches. And then we just need to increase the number of copies. So it seems that 10 is the number we need here, but I don't actually want that many. Let's reduce this, and I'm going to make this object maybe 6.5 inches. And that's still not enough, but it probably is enough if we change the distance in the cloner to 6.5 as well. Okay, so that is looking better. Let's go to the side view, and I'll just move this up a little bit. Let's zoom out, and maybe I'll move this back a little bit again. Let's do a quick render. And we could move it back a tad bit further, something like this. And because this is also a fairly small object in terms of the height, like the drip edge, I'm going to put it in the same null object as the drip edges here. So let's go ahead and drag this in there, and I'll just rename this to drip edge or drip edges and roof boards. And let's switch on the bevel deformers, and I think we still need to change the phone angle of this to 22. And I think that's looking good. Okay, and that is our finished shed. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Thanks for watching everyone. Stay safe and stay healthy, and take care.